Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for the Chorus Daily Briefing. Today, we're going to dig into some of our most recent data looking at an increasing amount of risk that we're particularly seeing around employment, timeline, postponement, and freezes. And I'm here today with Matt Amundson from EverString. Great to have you with us. I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, you bet. Thanks so much for having me. And secondarily, thank you so much for putting this on a daily basis. The information that we're all getting from this is really invaluable. So thank you, Jim.
I appreciate that. It's been a really great way to kind of unlock this data. First off, how are we doing before we get into the work side? How are you holding up?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. I'm actually doing great. I went through the same, I think, depression that most people did when they started working from home, just being away from the office and away from my staff and my team members. And then just trying to deal with, how to work, how to be a parent, how to do, the teaching thing. And then it all started to kind of coalesce maybe about 2 weeks ago. And I realized I had this great opportunity to spend all this time with my children that I've never had before in my entire life. And so I've actually been really enjoying the time with the kids.
It's I'm in a similar spot, where you have 3 kids, and it's different how much you can kind of balance the two. So love hearing that. We're hearing that across the board. Matt, I'm curious, any surprises, this whole work from home, as you've gone all in on that, anything that has surprised you about that experience, either working with your team, et cetera?
Just the increased level of transparency. I feel like I'm more connected to the projects that my team is working on. And when my CEO is asking me, hey, what's going on in marketing, I feel like I have a much more detailed view of that, which is interesting because of how often we're communicating. And it's interesting because I think when you're in the office, you start to take for granted and say like, oh, we're communicating because we're sitting next to each other. But the reality is you can sort of say like, oh, by feel, I know what's going on, or sort of in the conversations that I'm overhearing, I know what's going on. But if you're not sitting down and taking a detailed view at like what everybody's plan is for the day, and then, sort of doing a postmortem on that every day and determining how far we got and what are the next steps, you're really not as connected as you think you are. So I think that's been one major surprise for me.
Yeah, I think it's a terrific point. The whole kind of walking the halls, feeling the pulse, feeling the energy. It's not necessarily data driven. It's not scalable. And I think that with everybody having the same tile in Zoom and being data driven, we're running more effective operations across the board is what I'm seeing myself and hearing from others.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of organizations. Unfortunately, not for all, but here in Silicon Valley and parts of Boston and New York and Chicago, where a lot of companies are built for efficiency, we're really starting to flex those muscles. And I think the long-lasting effects of that are going to be really positive for businesses.
Yeah, I agree. Matt, one thing that I thought was unique about your background, I was excited to have this conversation, is that you've got an incredible background in the sales development, the inside sales. You've worked with SalesLoft as an advisor, Marketo background, and now you're CMO. So you're mixing the two together. How has that journey been for you, and how does it change the way you look at the sales landscape now that you've sat in both seats?
Yeah, it's interesting, fairly unique, although I don't think 10 years from now we'll think of it as being all that unique. I think there's a lot of people who are on the same career progression that I'm on, which is starting by running a sales development team that's managed by a marketing department. You really have this kind of visibility into the throughput of like top, middle, and bottom of the funnel, and where sales development plays its role in there, both in terms of kind of being a customer of marketing and then having sales be their customer. And so you really get to see both ends of it, not just from the, hey, what programs are working that actually, are helping my sales development team, but then ultimately what programs are working that help my sales development team, and then ultimately help the sales team to close more deals. And so having that 360 view of the entire customer life cycle from prospect to close, it can start for a lot of people in sales development. A lot of people do start in sales development. And ultimately we'll usually go into sales or marketing. But for me, I think, what it makes for me as a marketer is a very pipeline oriented marketer, a very, sort of bottom of funnel all the way down to close marketer, right? A revenue marketer. And I think more and more people have gravitated toward that type of marketing, less on top of funnel, less on brand, and more on pure demand. And so I think that put me in a very unique position to be an effective CMO.
Well, I'm glad that you're close to the pipeline because I'm going to be asking you a bunch of questions about what we're
Oh,
seeing
sure.
there. So the first data point we wanted to talk about today is, as we're looking at the deals and how they're affected by COVID-19 and just the crisis we're in, we're seeing an increase in mentions of postpone and delay in opportunities. And so it's still a fairly small percent, but it's up from where we were March 2nd at 1% of these meetings having a mention. Today it's at 1.5%. We had the end of the quarter March 30th, but we're still seeing this in a higher way than we did before. And I'm curious, does this match what you're seeing in your deals and what you're hearing out there?
Yeah, and I think 100%. And I think it's also predicated on what verticals you're talking to, what parts of the country that you're talking to. I think right now the big challenge is sort of trying to look at the country from a holistic perspective and looking at each vertical from a holistic perspective, because things are wildly different across verticals and across geos. We are, all the deals cycles that we're running right now on the East Coast have been way more impacted by COVID than anything that's happening on the West Coast. We're still seeing great deal momentum here with deals that we have in California and in Washington. And the deals that we're seeing in New York and Boston have been really impacted by that. So I think that's interesting. I think also certain verticals where, for us, financial services is a big vertical for our install base. And they've continued to buy from us at a very rapid clip. The sales cycles have not seemed to be impacted. In fact, in a lot of ways accelerated. Because they're utilizing our data to determine which companies they should be handing out loans to, which companies they should be handing out credit to. So our data is really, really important for those types of businesses, and they're feeling it more than ever that they need to have more accurate data. So I think it just depends. It's hard to sort of paint the whole thing with one broad brushstroke. Yeah,
the focus on verticals and geo. We've seen Boston has been hit particularly hard, at least in our data, on a decline. New York was down last week. Overall, it was holding steady. But the vertical part's really interesting. We were seeing some verticals down 30% and others up 30%. So getting our sales teams focused on those that are in growth mode versus, seeing really significant challenges, it makes a ton of sense. I think that's great advice. I'm curious from a messaging standpoint, any changes that you've made, or how have you changed your messaging and your playbook as you've been in this zone?
Yeah, so we've done a 360-degree messaging change. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it is actually true. So we pulled a 180 and went with the ultra empathetic, ultra, focused on, hey, in these difficult times. And then we basically 180'd out of that all the way back to square one. Back to pretty standard messaging with light levels of empathy, more what I would say humanity than empathy. So things like, hey, Jim, I'm writing you an email sitting on a beanbag chair in my living room, which is really bizarre because I'm used to sitting in an office in San Mateo, as I'm sure you're used to sitting in your office in San Francisco, right? So more humanity and less of the just raw empathy, because I think the thing is people are getting bombarded with the COVID message on the news when they're talking to their families, if they have, older parents. There's sort of widespread personal life panic, in addition to, consumer-based marketing is really geared around COVID right now. And, my personal email inbox is way more blown up than my professional inbox. And so I think people are looking to business to be a place of normalcy, right? They want, nobody's sick of hearing the news about COVID, but they're so entrenched in it. They're trying to find escapism in their inboxes. And actually, we've seen a much higher open rate on emails than we've seen in the past in specific geos. In places like the East Coast, it's not been as strong as it has been on the West Coast. But I think people have over-rotated to email subject lines that say COVID, coronavirus or pandemic and stuff like that. And people are just shying away from that. our friends at SalesLoft put out a report where they said if you mentioned any of those terms in a subject line, the open rate of the email decreased by like 60%. So people don't want to have that conversation. They want to talk business. And in places where, a lot of the hysteria has died down, more and more people are getting back to wanting to take meetings, wanting to talk to people. And what's really interesting, and I'm sure you guys are on the forefront of this information, is people are answering their phones. If you've got a direct line to them, people are answering their phones at a much higher rate than they were when they were working in their office.
Boy, I've now heard that, both our data shows that the connect rates have held steady in the spirit that, there's a decline in cold call volume. Or not in the office. But I've heard this from just about every guest on this briefing, that people are answering the phones. People want to talk to another human right now. It's all pulled up in our homes. And that's a fascinating, it's a very inspiring stat, and it's very human. I'm curious about your point about how the messaging has changed. You said 360. So we're back to, back to business, which is what I agree we need to do, with some empathy around the beanbag or breaking the ice. Did we not have that in our previous emails, or how are we doing this before COVID? How were we being human?
Well, I'm hoping that everybody was doing it that way before. But that's often not the case, as I'm sure, being a CEO and in the previous roles that you occupied and seeing the amount of prospecting emails you were getting, that's generally not the case. It's still largely a batch and blast world. But, it's interesting because I do a show on Wednesdays in the afternoon, and I had Dan Fronin, who I'm sure you might know, the CMO of Sendoso, on. And we were talking about, what are the types of emails, what are the types of messages that are breaking through? And we said personalization. And I said, yeah, that hasn't changed. It's always been that case, right? Like personalization will always cut through the noise, especially when you're coming at somebody who's, warm or even cold as a prospect. Obviously, if someone's, demonstrated interest in your product through like a demo request or any other kind of CTA, the likelihood that they'll respond to something canned is still pretty high. But if you're trying to grab someone's attention, in which we all are right now, personalization is still key. And what that means is, if you're a marketer who has sales development as a part of your department, and you think about sales development the way I think about sales development, which is just a channel of marketing, your SDRs are your best asset right now. Broad-based marketing that you can do out of a marketing automation system, it's probably not going to cut through the noise. There's an overload of just like content that's been flowing everywhere, from 10 tips to how to work better from home, or how to manage your suddenly disparate teams, whatnot. We're all overwhelmed with that. And I think more and more what people want is just a human interaction, like what you're talking about. Part of the reason why a piece of content like what you guys, of course, are creating right now is so powerful. People want to connect with other people. They want to have conversations. They don't want to be talked at, and they don't want to be told like, hey, here's the 10 things that you should be doing while you're working from home, when they're like, I'm still a professional. I'm a teacher. I'm trying to keep my marriage together if I have one. I don't need to be told that like I need a stand-up desk, or, I need to go for a 10-mile run every day, or whatever it is.
Yeah. I think it's great. Well, one last question on this data. So we're specifically also looking at this postpone and delay. What advice do you give your team when your customers are saying, look, we like what you're doing, but we need to postpone, we need to delay, our budgets are frozen? How do you work through that? Can you work through it right now?
Yeah, if someone's dropping, my budget's been delayed or pulled, there's not a whole lot that you can do with that. And I think, the best thing that you can do is take a very human approach to that and say, totally understand, I'm here for you, and try to stay connected with them in between, between that moment and when their budgets open back up. But and that's, maybe like a 101 response to that. I think what is, more of the, 103B response to that, the more advanced, would be painting a picture of the future. And this is something that I had a conversation with Stephen Brody about, who's the VP of sales over at Bevy Labs. A lot of people are talking about, like, in these difficult times, I know it's difficult right now, I know it's a challenge, and not very many people are painting the picture of what the future is going to be like, and setting the tone for, hey, in 6 months, this is what the landscape's going to look like. If it's financial services, hey, in 6 months, there's going to be a lot of businesses that are looking for small business loans. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for you to to work with a lot of these companies. But if you don't have the right data, you're going to miss out on the opportunity, and your competitors are going to swoop all these up. And I think that's a much better strategic conversation to be having with prospects now than just, cool, I'll talk to you in 6 months.
I love it. I think I had Sean Andrew from MongoDB on the other morning. We were talking about this tidal wave that could be coming of people rehiring and needing to onboard. And just, I think the optimism is helpful in that. I also, one call out, only 1.5% of all of these conversations are talking about postpone and delay. So, 98 out of 100 are not saying this. And that's also encouraging to see. Now, one of the other data points that we wanted to share today, and this one gets deeper into really looking at the employment risk side. And we haven't gone as deep on this one before, but looking at, are we hearing about people not hiring? Are we hearing about people, doing a reduction in force, a RIF? And the data show that we saw an increase of 121% of RIF being mentioned, reduction in force, and not hiring has increased 151%. Now that said, it's still a total of 6.9% of the total calls, and you can see that the RIF is a little bit higher part of that. This is the challenging part of where we're at today. What are you hearing about this from your clients as well?
We definitely are. I think the thing about EverString that's helpful for us is we drink our own champagne, and part of what our data does is it's not just data, but it's also data science. So we're able to look at what are the companies that are most impacted by the coronavirus. And we're really not spending much time calling into those organizations. We're marketing to them broadly using our Marketo instance, and we're still keeping them a part of certain campaigns, but we're not utilizing SDRs to go after those types of businesses. We're focusing in on companies that are actually benefiting from coronavirus, which is, not a great way to say it, but, they're the products that they sell or the services that they sell are beneficial to people or businesses during these times. And so we're spending time working with organizations like that and really avoiding the places right now with our people that aren't doing as well. And that's been really helpful to us. FedEx is a customer of ours. We did a project for them where we basically re-tiered or reprioritized all their accounts for their sales reps based upon businesses that are still in business, still want to be doing shipping and need logistics help. And that's been a massive boon to their business as well.
Matt, any other marketing strategies that you've put together, especially with events being, physical in-person events are not existing right now?
Yeah.
How are you building the funnel from that standpoint? I understand that you've changed your targeting. That makes a ton of sense. But any other, for those that are listening from a marketing standpoint, any other channels, approaches, unique things that you've been testing that you're seeing success with?
Yeah, so I think there was a big rush to go to like these virtual events. And kind of from a brand perspective, throw a PowerPoint on the screen and go talk at people. I don't think that's what people like right now. I think, brands like yourself really understand this. Getting people together and having a conversation is actually what people generally remember most from a trade show. It's their time milling around during happy hours. It's their time going to the parties. It's their time having conversations like in between the halls. Sure, there's always a great session that's a mind blower that, will make you remember that show forever. But really, when you think back on like Dreamforce, you really think about like, oh yeah, I sat in the room and listened to, the SVP of marketing from Salesforce talk about whatever. No, you think about like, I remember the conversation that I had with this person that ultimately led to my next job or my next deal or whatever. And so I think recreating that, like what you're doing on this today, is far more powerful than standing up, hey, we're going to do 5 days of content all built around, what we do. I think people are more inclined to want to engage and have, much more casual conversations like this one.
I mean, I'm personally excited to see what happens. I joined Chorus right in the middle of this, so March 16th. So I still have not been to our office as the CEO, and it's fully distributed. And I think that Bill Gates' comments about how business travel might change. Your point about the events, I agree. I think that there'll be such a hunger for experiences and bringing people together in unique ways. And we can meet, we can learn in remote environments, but that experience we do together, I think we're going to crave in ways that people are going to blow our minds with how they make life more fun, more engaging beyond the screen.
I totally agree. One
last thing I want to put up here is a live poll for those that are with us live today. Somebody just launched this. And the question is, are you seeing more risk show up in your calls? So yes, more buyers are pushing deals this summer. Yes, more buyers are pushing deals the fall. Yes, more buyers don't know when they can buy, somewhat, and then not really. So it's just the answers are coming in. So are you seeing more risk show up in your calls? Right now, 57% are saying yes, more buyers are pushing deals to the summer.
Yeah.
And the next one, 25% is yes, more buyers don't know when they can buy. And then somewhat not really are the last two. So yeah, leading answer is yes, people are pushing deals a bit. It shows the focus that we need to have on value and going after the right people right now.
Absolutely.
Matt, I wanted to say thanks for kicking off Thursday with us and sharing your insights. Super, super valuable and just great to connect with someone and kick off the day this way.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. Thanks for putting on this program. It's awesome. And thanks for having such a great product Chorus that our business has loved for years and years.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Matt. Cheers.
Bye-bye.